Hello everybody, my name is Citrus, and believe it or not, we used to talk about Nintendo on this channel. Yes, I know, we've been bombarded with Sonic videos recently, but it's just because I've been more interested in talking about Sonic recently, and Nintendo hasn't been doing anything that interesting, in my opinion. Like, Kirby this year was really good, but then after that, there wasn't much. We had Nintendo Switch Sports, which was fine. There was Mario Strikers Battle League, which, I don't know if anyone even really cares anymore. Bayonetta 3 is gonna be cool, but I'm not, extremely hyped for that one. I just kind of know that it's gonna be great, and I'm gonna love it. So there's no real crazy excitement from me. I'm just kind of like, yeah, I'll play that, it'll be good. And I was feeling a similar way with Splatoon 3, where it kind of just looked like more Splatoon to me. However, if you've been seeing my Twitter recently, you know that I have caught the Splatoon bug once again. I'm probably more into Splatoon now than I have ever been before. I don't know what it is. I've just recently really gotten into Splatoon. And because of that, I'm actually more excited for Splatoon 3 now, simply because I'm just more into Splatoon in general now. But that doesn't really change the fact that I have some gripes with Splatoon 3. It looks really similar to Splatoon 2, kind of just with a new coat of paint, with new UI changes, new weapons, new specials, new stages, all the kind of basic stuff that you'd expect from a new entry. But nothing truly groundbreaking to shake up the formula. I'm kind of rationalizing this in my head as it's sort of being like the bookend to this Splatoon trilogy, if you will, where all these games kind of feel similar and they kind of set up this first era of Splatoon. But then when we get into the next game after Splatoon 3, I'm thinking they'll probably change up more about the series. And that's basically what I'm here to talk about. Not really stuff that I want to see in Splatoon 3, because I kind of already know what I'm getting with Splatoon 3, but stuff for the future of Splatoon, stuff for after Splatoon 3, what we could see that could make the series really stand out. So with all that said, let's just jump straight into my number one thing that I want to see for the future of Splatoon, and that is more movement options. Splatoon, more so than a lot of other shooters, is very movement heavy. If you aren't good at aiming or you don't have the fastest reflexes, if you can just outmaneuver your opponent, you can still win like 90% of matchups. However, this movement hasn't really evolved since the first game. You really are just kind of spraying ink around and swimming to try and move around your opponent and just flank them, basically. And the dualies changed this in Splatoon 2, where now you had this dodge roll mechanic, and that was super cool. It added a new layer to the movement of Splatoon, and that actually made me a dualie player, not so much the dual wielding, but the fact that it added more movement. That's what I want to see in a new game. I want to see even more movement stuff, and not just movement stuff for one specific weapon, but movement stuff across the board. Like, imagine in Splatoon 4 we have wall running, dashes, you got double jumps. It would be insane. It would really change the way you think about your surroundings in Splatoon, because that wall, instead of just being a barrier, now you're thinking about, oh, I can use that to run on the side in case someone comes up in front of me to sort of throw off their aim. It also makes it scarier to play, because now your opponents can come out from any which angle, and you can't just worry about, oh, if there's opponent ink around me, maybe they're gonna come up and swim behind me, but also on the walls and around the corners and all that. It would be chaos. And I think some people probably wouldn't like how big of a change this is, but I feel like if we're onto the fourth Splatoon and they don't do anything major with the gameplay, it's gonna start feeling stale, and it kind of already is feeling stale, so I feel like they need to do something big to shake up the gameplay. And I think movement mechanics would be the number one thing that they could do that could really switch things up. Of course, I am not a competitive Splatoon player. I don't know anything about competitive Splatoon, so let me know if this is a really horrible idea or not. I have no idea. I just think it sounds kind of fun. Add wall running to any game and it's 10 times better to me, so maybe that's just my bias. The next big thing that I want to see is actually about the single player. Now, previous Splatoon campaigns have been very different from their multiplayer counterparts. They're not turf wars, they're more of these platforming stages where you're using weapons to try and maneuver around, and there's this whole story about the Octarians and stealing the Great Zapfish, and you get a lot of interesting lore insights in the single player mode, and it's definitely one of the most unique shooter single players that I've experienced. And while I think that's really cool, it ultimately kind of feels disjointed compared to the rest of the Splatoon experience, and a lot of the lore insights that we get kind of feel like background information rather than the current happenings in the Splatoon world. And what I mean by that is that while I think the story mode platforming stuff is unique, certainly, I wouldn't say it's very fun, honestly. I kind of get through these stages just because I want to beat it and find out some of the lore for the Splatoon world and collecting all the sunken scrolls and stuff. The platforming itself, I'm like, it's fine. And then the lore itself that you do get, while it's interesting, a lot of it is just like history stuff and like what's happened in the past rather than the current goings on in Inkopolis. I think what would be personally more interesting for me is a story mode that's just about Inklings doing turf wars. You'll have your little team of NPC companions who you get to know, and they all have different kind of personalities, and then you meet rival characters that you fight in these like turf war tournaments, and you know, it could be like a really involved sort of experience in turf war, making it feel more alive and real, like there's real competition going on, almost like the Splatoon manga. And then on top of this sort of basic tournament structure, you could have more of that lore stuff. You know, maybe DJ Octavio sends in a team of Octolings to try and sort of hijack the tournament and steal whatever the grand prize is. Probably some sort of like energy source, since the Octarians are going through like an energy crisis right now. Or what if one of these tournaments is being headed by Mr. Grizz, and then these Salmonids try and invade the tournament because they realize that Mr. Grizz is running it, and they kind of hate Mr. Grizz because he's kind of the bane of their existence. You can still have some of this interesting lore stuff tie into this new kind of gameplay mode that's based on turf war. I just think it would be cool if we got to see some of these sort of single player only ideas cross over with the regular world of Inkopolis, and just seeing that kind of clash I think would be really cool. And I think it would be a good payoff too for all of the previous campaigns where we got all the backstory, all the history on the stuff. Now we can see how it affects the current day. Of course, we would need to switch up the gameplay a little bit to feel distinct from the regular online multiplayer, so I think having different special moves that you can only do in single player, or like team moves that you can do with your AI companions, would be really cool. Also, your opponents maybe have different abilities, like when you're fighting the Octolings, maybe they cheat because, you know, they're just there to try and steal the prize, so they'll have like, you know, special weapons going off every 10 seconds, or like they have really powerful weapons or something, you know, just crazy stuff like that. I understand some people might find this less cool and less interesting than the secret agent approach, and while I can see on some level how, yes, doing just a regular tournament arc can be seen as less unique, that doesn't mean it has to be less fun. If anything, they can do a lot more crazy stuff with this, have a lot more fun gameplay variety, and do some lore that actually affects the current day of Splatoon rather than just giving us a history lesson. But that's enough about the single player. I want to talk about the idea that really made me make this whole video in the first place. I want to have an apartment in Splatoon. Splatoon's world is so deep and rich, with each fictional band having their own history, and each brand having their own target demographic and style that they appeal to. And it really makes the world feel just so realized, like everything has been thought of. However, when you're actually playing just the regular multiplayer, you don't really feel involved in this world. You kind of feel like a spectator who's just sort of visiting town. Like, the hubs are really cool and immersive, but you don't really feel like you live there, you know? Your character kind of just feels like an outsider to this place. And I feel like having your own piece of the Splatoon world to call your own and customize and do whatever you want with would be a good way to sort of remedy this feeling like you're just visiting this place and you're not really part of this world. I feel like in any game, whenever you have some sort of base builder or home to call your own, it just makes it feel way cozier. It makes you feel like you're more involved and like you're really part of that world. And it's just fun. It's cool to have your own space to decorate and do whatever you want with. And with the urban setting of Splatoon, I feel like it's just such a good opportunity to let players have their own little apartment to mess around with. You could buy like decorations and wallpaper and furniture to really deck out your place and make it feel like your own. Maybe you could even like invite your teammates over to just see your space and kind of show off, almost like the igloos in Club Penguin. I know that sounds silly, but that's the first comparison that comes to mind for me. And who knows, maybe even with your little apartment, you could play little mini games with your teammates and do other stuff. I feel like it could be a really fun sort of social aspect to Splatoon. Overall, I just really like base building in games, and I feel like this would be a super cool way to incorporate it. Moving on from the apartment stuff, next is just a couple of things that are smaller, but I do want to see in the future of the series. For one, gifting and trading equipment, I feel like just kind of makes sense. I feel like this is something that every multiplayer game should have. When you're collecting equipment, you should be able to, gift people stuff, give them whatever weapons you don't want, or, if you want to trade with them, like they have something you want and you have something they want, you can trade. I just feel like it makes sense. It seems like a no-brainer. Another thing I feel like would be really easy to add would be a simple message system. We have the booyah and the follow me button, but there could be a lot more going on there that would be, just simple little stuff like how they do it in Monster Hunter. You have little emojis and things like that just to be like, yeah, or alright, or, simple stuff like that. And kind of tying into that, I feel like taunts and emotes are just so prevalent in most multiplayer games. And I feel like they could be really fun in Splatoon, you could have breakdancing and all these different other moves, and it would really fit with the world of Splatoon. You think about how Fortnite has all these crazy dances, but it really doesn't make sense. It's kind of just something goofy. Whereas in Splatoon, there's such a hip-hop influence from it. I feel like it would actually make a lot more sense for Splatoon to do it. And overall, I'm just tired of getting squid bagged on. I mean, come on, just do something original. Squid bagging, that's so Splatoon 1. Come in here with some taunts and emojis and stuff. And I kind of mentioned it earlier, but minigames. In Splatoon 1, if you don't know, there was this little minigame you could play on the gamepad while you were waiting to get into a match. And it was kind of like Doodle Jump, but with a squid. And it was really fun. I loved messing with that before every match. And I was kind of sad to see it disappear with Splatoon 2. We had the weird music modifier thing, if you move the sticks while you're in the lobby, it'll change how the sound is, which is cool, but not really as fun as the Doodle Jump game. There's also the rhythm game in Splatoon 2 outside of the shoal, but I never really played that, so it was kind of whatever for me. I just want to see more of these minigames, kind of parodying maybe other little apps and games from Nintendo. I think that would be really cool and could just be a fun thing to have in the game in general. And the final little thing that we need it. It's so obvious. Let us skip the news. For the love of God, let us skip the news. I don't care what stages are going on. I really only play Turf War most of the time, so just show me those and then let me skip. Please and thank you. But yeah, those are all my thoughts for what I want to see in the next Splatoon. Obviously, Splatoon 3 probably won't have any of this stuff. It seems to be going in a very straightforward direction for the series. And I think that's fine for, the third game in the series. It's going to kind of hopefully bookend this sort of trilogy of Splatoon. And then in the future, maybe we can see some of the ideas that I brought up here. But let me know what you guys thought about all of my ideas in the comments down below. Whether you love them, you hate them, whether you've got your own ideas of your own that you would like to see in a future Splatoon game. All those thoughts, please let me know down below. And once again, thank you guys so much for watching today's video. If you enjoyed it, click that like button, subscribe if you want to see more videos like this, and I'll see you all later. Peace.